this is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast. If any of you have been listening to me, you know that I spend most of my time in Hanoi, Vietnam, and have lived here for quite a while. I'm actually working here in Hanoi, Vietnam. I travel throughout Vietnam. I have to say, Vietnam is a beautiful country. And one thing that I've been noticing more, especially over the years, is how many more visitors are coming to Vietnam. It used to be when I first came here, there were very few foreigners on the airplane, and now there are many, many people that have discovered Vietnam and are traveling here because Vietnam is a great place to travel and just a great place to see. I want to talk a little bit about Vietnam's past, in particular, how Vietnam's war-torn past shapes its vibrant present. Vietnam is a very vibrant country today. And many people have asked me, because I'm an American, and said, have you ever felt any animosity or have you ever felt fear for your life being an American and living in Vietnam? I first came to Vietnam in the early 1990s before the U.S. had any diplomatic relations here. I later then moved here in 2000. So I've been here in Vietnam or in and out of Vietnam for many, many years. And I can honestly say that I have never felt my life in danger or felt any animosity because I was American. I've never had a Vietnamese say to me like, oh, you're an American, I hate you because of what your people did to my people during the war. In fact, it has been very different. It's been very welcoming. The Vietnamese people have been very kind and very generous. That has always been one of the amazing things about Vietnam and in Asia in general that I've seen. You look at countries like Japan that was, bombed heavily by the Americans during the World War II. Basically they moved forward. They didn't allow that to define their country or who they were. Vietnam has done the same. From 1945 to 1975, Vietnam endured 30 years of near constant warfare. First came the battle against the French, then the Civil War between the North and South, the Cold War, and then it became areas of the Cold War, with of course, the Americans were involved in that war, and that's known as the American War by the Vietnamese. There became Agent Orange, the My Lai Massacre, the Tet Offensive, all these horrible things happened. This was a chapter of time where terrible, terrible things happened, which many parts, people are still paying for, still paying for many of these things. But what may surprise you is Vietnam doesn't dwell on the war. They don't talk about the war. They don't dwell on the war. I lived in Hanoi here, and one of the streets I lived on, there was this man that I used to always, thought he looked like Ho Chi Minh. He had a little Ho Chi Minh beard. I'm sure he fought in the war, and he every day would walk with his little wheelchair. I'm sure something happened to him in the war that made him that way. He always smiled at me, said hello, no animosity at all. I've lived and worked in Vietnam for years, and like I've said, I've always felt nothing but welcome. So any of you that are out there thinking about, do you want to come to Vietnam as an American, please do not hesitate. You will find this to be a very friendly and a wonderful place. Vietnam simply is not stuck in the past. It hasn't erased it either. You can still crawl through the Chu Chi tunnels outside Ho Chi Minh City, visit war remnants museums, where images of the war, atrocities can be shown. You can take a tour of Hanoi in a restored military jeep. But once you step out of these, created experiences, you step into a country that's firmly facing forward. And I think this is one of the great things and lessons that we can learn is this is the country which is facing forward. They are not looking back at all. Walk down the street of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh and you'll see tech startups, buzzing cafes, electric motorcycles, and teenagers filming TikTok. Vietnam's median age is just above 30. So they have a population here about 95 million, 97 million, close to 100 million. But over half of it is just about the age of 30. So it's a very young population. This is the nation that's driven by youth, a generation born long after the bombs stopped falling. But even the older generation that had the bombs falling on them are still not bitter either. What's remarkable is how, this generation teaches you, not with ignorance, but with perspective. Vietnam hasn't just rebuilt, it's really redefined itself. It took the architectural bones that the French left behind, colonial villas, and they reshaped them. You go to Hanoi, beautiful downtown part of Hanoi with many of the old French colonial buildings. You can find many of these, buildings with, repurposed co-working spaces or trendy boutique hotels. The past is not hidden. It's just been repurposed. There's also the cuisine, which if you love food, this is the place to travel. Vietnam is a great foodie capital. Great French bread, great, Vietnamese food and ingredients is just very good. So today, Vietnam is no longer a secret. It is a place that's on many people's bucket list for travel. It's a great place to visit, great beaches, great things to visit, great things to see. There's many things that I've learned living in Vietnam, but some of the things I learned is that the war does not dominate life. Young people here are still chasing their dreams. Cities are growing upward, and a culture is eager to share itself, not shield itself. I've never once felt unsafe. I've never once been treated with hostility for being American. I've had meals in homes of people whose families fought on both sides of the war. I work with people whose grandparents were Viet Cong on the other side of the war. The war may be part of their history, but it's not their identity. This is what makes Vietnam different, in many ways wiser. They've been able to get over the war that I think in many instances we as Americans maybe have not been able to. This is one of the things that I love about Vietnam. I love the way that they've been able to forgive, forget, not really forget, I wouldn't say forget, but they've been able to forgive, learn from the past, and move on. And that's one of the great strengths of this beautiful country. If you'd like to be able to read more about this, you can read my blog post on how Vietnam's war-torn past shapes its vibrant present. And if you're considering to visit this country, I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful place to visit. You'll come out and you will love it as much as I do. Please subscribe. We'd love to have you be part of our community. We're all about living our lives as a global citizen, and we hope you'll join with us to live your life as a global citizen.